Countries around the world are changing their immigration policy due to housing.
And they should.
France, Canada, Australia, the UK, all announcing they want to cut back on immigration into their countries. And why? Because they don't have places to put people.
Well, we've done videos on this before, guys. Like, hopefully you go back and take a look. We showed you why the average price in most places around Canada are well over $1 million. I think the average price of a home is in the 700s. I'm going off of memory. We did a chart. We showed it to you based on immigration. But they're not the only country. That they're on our border, so they're the ones that we see the most. And obviously, this is a big hot topic politically too, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And, but what's interesting is even the more liberal, more progressive immigrants are cutting back because there's just not enough resources.
Well, I wonder why. Like, right.
Well, there's just not enough resources. I mean, in defense to it, though, they do add really good things to they do add labor, right? And they do stimulate the economy to a degree. But the problem is just people have nowhere to live, and some of the countries that don't have the health care as well.
Well, you can't put millions of people, drop them into an economy with the existing housing stock as is, and expect prices not to go up, rents not to go up, and all that stuff.
Well, and Canada made headlines this week, Jerry, if you want to play video one, because they have announced they're going to be cutting back 20% on their immigration numbers. And in order to do that, it's not just cutting back 20%. They're like basically stopping a lot of the migration in order to be able to cut back 20%.
Ottawa has just announced a major cut to immigration. It's reducing permanent immigration levels by at least 20%. Now, this move follows years of rapid increases to the number of permanent residents coming into Canada and big increases in the number of people coming to Canada on a temporary basis as well. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau made the announcement earlier in the day.
Today, we're announcing that we will reduce the number of immigrants we bring in over the next 3 years, which will result in a pause in the population growth over the next 2 years. This builds on our previously announced measures to cap international student permits and reform the temporary foreign worker program, all of which we are implementing with a single aim: stabilize our population growth to give all levels of government time to catch up, time to make the necessary investments in healthcare, in housing, in social services to accommodate more people in the future.
Absolutely. So I think that part of that, right, he said right there, is housing. But before we go any further, I want Jerry to play video 2 as well, because they dive a little bit more into the housing situation in this video. Trudeau kind of, he kind of bounced around it. Like all levels of government need to catch up. But then what does that mean? That means there's not enough healthcare, there's not enough housing, there's not enough social services.
The government believes limiting immigration will help the housing crisis in this country. According to one housing report, to restore affordability, Canada needs to build 3.5 million more homes on top of what's under construction. According to Statistics Canada, 2023 saw a record population growth that hasn't been seen since the 1950s. Minister Miller says today's measures will result in our population decreasing by 0.2% in the next 2 years.
So what I think is interesting about that is, so they need over 3 million houses, right? So, but the problem is, if you keep influxing people, you don't just need 3 million houses. You need 3 million houses plus all the people that come in every year, plus all the kids those people have, plus, so it really starts to get out of control. And I thought this was interesting, but by 2027, just based on these immigration cuts, that's going to essentially reduce the gap by 670,000 units
it's
for Canada.
Guys. So here's the thing, without going too far down this political rabbit hole, which is you guys are going to see in the next 10 days, just take a look at other countries and what they're doing. And, they've had massive immigration policies to bring people in, population, and it's affected housing and rent, period. It just has. And this is France, Canada, Australia, the UK, all of them. So just go online and look. All right. Okay. So then now apply it to here. So we're in a bit of a lag here. I would say we're in the first quarter of a football game. You know, we have 4 quarters. We just brought a whole bunch of people in. They have been doing it a while. So, you know, you have to really, unless you're delusional, you have to take a look at the fact that all these people create stress on housing. More supply of people creates more demand on housing, period. So that's actually coming, guys. And so one of the things that I found really interesting, you guys know I follow housing statistics, and I specifically follow like how many units are being built. You need to know this if you're going to invest in areas. And right now, you know, like 2 years ago before interest rates went crazy, we had a lot of units under construction. And then when rates went up, most of you know, a lot of it pulled back. So we have this temporary construction. We call it the pig through the python, right? So this construction is just moving through the snake. Okay? Now, it's hitting right now. Okay, and so what's supposed to be happening right now in my world is I'm supposed to have massive rent cuts. I'm supposed to have big rent concessions. This is supposed to be the time for the tenant. Okay, I want you to know this. It's supposed to be the time for the tenant.
Because so much supply has been
added.
Yeah,
and that's normal, right? That's actually what creates what'll fix the problem is more housing. That's why I know we're going to get to the Kamala thing, but that just creates more demand. We need more supply. So Jerry, pull up that chart I gave you. Now I want to show you guys this. This is really, really interesting. Now, what does this mean? Now this is through September, so it's about a month old. But New York City, Kansas City, Boston, Indy, DC, Detroit, these are all markets that are positive rent growth, while at a time that a lot of units are being added to the United States. Now, to be fair, 8 of the 10, I think it says 8 of the 10 top markets have gone up. Also, 8 of the 10, the top have gone down. So there are markets that have gone down because of supply. They're supposed to go down because of supply. What you're not going to see on here is Phoenix. You're not going to see Dallas. You're not going to see some of the markets that are getting a lot of units. This is a really important thing to understand because there's no conceivable way that New York should have positive rent growth based on what I see. So now that I dug a little bit deeper, if you look at Axios, this is a really, really good. Okay, Jared, good. This is a great. This is the Axios. Migrant surge makes U.S. housing crisis worse. AXIOS. New York City has 60,000 immigrants. Chicago has 68,000 homeless. Guys, this is just the beginning. I'm telling you.
So you're basically saying because there's so many immigrants in New York City and DC and everything else that they're pushing those rent prices.
No question.
Because even though all the units were just added, they're taking up, the supply.
Yeah, just take a look at, you just got back from Ohio today, right? Mm-hmm. The Ohio girl here.
Yes.
Like, you can't add 30,000 people to a 50,000 person town.
Right.
Like, period. You just can't. And that's going to put stress on all kinds of things, not just housing, but it's housing for sure. So this is a big problem. I think, and not to mention the financial impact. Take a look at budget.house.gov, budget.house.gov, and you'll see there's a whole financial analysis from $150 billion to $400 billion. Now, everybody's going with the low one, of course, but man, I'll tell you what, this is not only a housing crisis, but it's a financial crisis. And then I went back and I started looking at the deportation thing because everybody's all, on that. Guess what? Bush deported 10 million people during his presidency. Obama deported 5 million. Now, of course, who knows, what will happen. This is the tale of two cities, depending on who gets elected. Obviously, Trump's already said he's going to deport or however he's going to do it. I'm not sure. Kamala hasn't really come out and said yet.
Well, I think what you're trying to get at is that basically, these countries like Canada, Australia, Europe, they're all saying we need to cut back on our immigration policy. We need to deport people once, their credentials expire to be here. We're not going to give people citizenship that we said we're going to give citizenship to. And when you look at got Trump. He's very obviously in that lane, probably, excessively. And then Kamala, she's not saying that right now. But I also think, though, that you have to remember that we're in a political, we're a week and a half from the election.
I get it.
These countries are just recently changing their tunes, and the United States may change their tune as well after, if she were to get elected. I think that, potentially, because right now she's basically saying, in order to solve the housing crisis, I'm going to give everyone $25,000 to buy a house. But as we know, to your point, that doesn't fix supply. It only increases demand.
We have demand.
Yeah, we have
They're
demand.
called immigrants.
Yeah, and just normal American citizens too want to buy a house.
I know, but I'm saying, the optics are great. Like, give everybody $25,000, but and that's fine. I mean, take it and buy a home. I highly suggest it. The issue, though, is it just creates more demand for a little bit of supply.
Well, and the issue, as we all know, is if you give everyone $25,000, housing prices, it just increases demand. Housing prices go up more than $25,000, so you're not really saving any money. So, but I would be interested to see if Kamala were to win, if her tune would change, because Canada literally just started to change their tune just very recently.
That's true. Yeah, but again, I would say they're in the third quarter. We're in the first quarter. So they're still trying to figure this out.
But I do want to look at something. So the Center for Immigration Studies delivered something to the White House, and it was very interesting. So since 2021, our population has grown 3.8 million recorded, which it could be significantly more immigrants, so from 2021 to 2024. But what they can actually calculate is the Census Bureau data showed that since January 2021, the number of immigrant-headed households is up 2.5 million. So that's 2.5 million additional households since 2021 that are, paying rent and everything else. And if you look, there's about 5 million homes added from 2020 to 2023. So the immigrants, so basically we've built 5 million homes or 5 million residences, apartments, everything else. And we've had 2.5 additional immigrant homes needed. Right. So they've taken half of the additional supply. Yeah,
it gets way worse if you go back 10 years prior to that. If you guys take a look at the great financial crisis, which is I went through in 2008, think about it. Like, banks are going down. Lehman went down. Like, all this stuff happened during that period of time. People losing their houses. What that did was that time of uncertainty, no new construction, no significant new construction. So that was a supply problem. And then the demand came, of course, right? It just offset. So what everyone is jumping up and down on right now, all real estate investors are happy because they think they were so smart. It was a result of the 2008 to about 2013, 14, where there was nothing meaningful significantly that happened from a new construction standpoint. Yet, people are still being born. There's still immigrants coming in. And so what happened was we now have this demand side again. So demand ate up all the supply, and now we're in a supply problem, and that's why the $25,000 isn't going to work. It's funny, and I was obviously trying to prepare for this today. I see these articles. One was on BusinessInsider.com. I mean, this was just through. I just had to shake my head. It's this guy, Philippe Demott. He's the journalist, and I looked him up. Of course, he's been out of school 2 years, and he wrote, "The crackdown on immigration will make construction more expensive." I had to laugh. I'm like, really? Like, there's so much construction right now going on. This is not, 25 million people is not going to help it or hurt it. And then the other one is it also may be disinflationary. Well, isn't that the flipping point? Like, we're trying to make it disinflationary. Like, we're trying to deliver housing cheaper. That is the whole point.
But I think that's part of the interesting part of all of it, right? Is that I would say, and as a general rule, a lot of investors lean more conservative, lean more towards Trump as a general rule. But if the Harris campaign wants to keep bringing in people, that's actually going to help real estate prices. Yes. And it's actually going to help those of us that already own assets because of the supply and the demand. So it's just, I was just thinking about it this weekend. I'm like, that's so interesting to me that, it's because simply people don't understand economics, right? Like those that maybe, haven't bought a home yet, or, don't have enough money for a home, or whatever. They don't really understand the economics of it, because they don't understand that if you bring in more people, the prices are going to keep going up. They kind of fall for the whole thing that, additional workers help the labor market, but that's not even necessarily true either. So
it happens on a country. It can happen on an area. If a big employer moves to an area, it creates a bunch of stress on the area. And it drives housing prices up. It drives rents up. It's harder to get into restaurants. It's harder to get into schools. All that stuff. Every single thing. And it's just we saw this after the pandemic with the migration. People moved around.
Right.
People moved around. And you know who benefited? Obviously, some states, if you look at North Carolina, Florida, Texas, they benefited for sure as a result of that. But also a lot of the little towns around some of the big towns. So if you look at
Coeur d'Alene.
Yeah. Well, Coeur d'Alene, Idaho is where we are. Yeah. But people moved, and it blew that town up. And, not good. But, so the big problem there is that nobody can live there and work there. That's
right.
Actually the big issue. We're there in the summer, and the big complaint is they got to drive 30, 40 minutes now. Before, wasn't a problem. So now that's a temporary small town, one issue. The point is, same thing though, same concept. A lot of people came to a town that only had an infrastructure set up for whatever was normal at the time. Now that's the same thing that just happened in the United States. And this is an opportunity for a lot of you too. And we can't just blame it all on immigration. We also have to blame it on government officials for making housing harder to build. Zoning and all that kind of stuff. So, this is a very complex problem. And but giving somebody $25,000, that's stupid. Seriously. I hope it works for some people, but it's a demand side. It gets more people to buy a home, which is great. The problem is what you really need to bring down prices is more homes.
So I have a question. So more homes or less people. Less people
or
is
both.
the other, side of that.
Or both.
So if the U.S. or, Canada were to implement these policies and kind of bring down immigration, would that make you worry more about like apartment rents and home prices? Or do you think that they'd have to bring it down so significantly to see a difference?
I don't listen. I've been doing this for 30 years, and this immigration thing is new. So, they've always had immigration. Don't get me wrong. You just got to look at how many people die each year, how many people are born each year, plus immigration. That's something I follow. Okay. Every single president over the history of this country has had, an immigration policy, but it's never been like this. This is so many. These are, not to mention the crime and all that kind of stuff. I don't want to go too far down that, but there's all that. So to answer your question, there is an issue right now. How are you going to get rid of 60,000 migrants in New York City? Like seriously, the state has the city has pre-leased apartment complexes and hotels for these, and they're called sanctuary cities. And Trump says he's going to get rid of them. Now, that's part of the problem. And I don't. It's. The bloom's off the rose here. I'm telling you right now. Like, renters are in big trouble in 2-3 years from now. There's no way anybody can keep up with this. No way. We're trying to build as many projects as we can because we see the demand coming. But I'm telling you, when interest rates are this high, it's hard to build.
Well, and it's interesting, too, because I was looking over at Australia because their government has said they're going to build 3 million homes in the next couple of years.
How?
Right. Exactly. Well,
they need the private sector.
Well, it was funny because they've been working on it for a year and they've already spent $4 million on planning studies and reviews. Yeah. So I had to laugh at that because that is the problem. That's why it's so hard to build.
Just let the free market do its thing. Seriously, make it easy for us to build. Fast track. I know there are some cities doing the right thing out there. There are cities that are fast tracking. And in fact, I was with a guy from Canada this weekend, and he said in Calgary, where he's from, they're actually fast tracking you could take what would normally be like a single family neighborhood and put up he's going to put up 24 townhomes on a lot that he has, and so they're fast tracking things, and that's actually how you do it. You actually get the people want to build, builders want to build. There's a whole industry out there of people that are trying to find land and build projects, hire contractors. All that stuff will get absorbed if you just let it be, right? But the interest rates have to be right, and of course the costs. Unfortunately, we can't build houses for cheap anymore, right? And so they're not necessarily affordable. But the more houses that you guys see, the better it will be for the consumer in every way. The less the less. It's just you just look at when we had in 2008. When the listings we had, I can't remember. I think there were 3 million. I think it was a crazy number. All went boom, and as the unwinding happened during that great financial crisis, and what it did is it lowered prices on houses. That's what it did. It made its way through the banking system. It was painful for a lot of people. That's what happened. It happened, and so that's actually what all of these countries need, including ours. And people are about to experience what I would consider to be it's going to be significantly worse.
It's interesting though because the government. I mean, it sounds good, right? I think Kamala said she's gonna build 5 million houses in her first term or something. And it all sounds great, but the problem is that where a lot of people want to live, there's not necessarily space to build that many houses, right? Because they're not spread out all throughout the country. Because to your point, there's not jobs, right? But then the other thing is that, like what happened in Australia, there's so much bureaucracy, and that's part of the problem with building in general is there's so much bureaucracy that it costs $3 million. I mean, think about it. It costs $3 million to get reviews and planning done. They're still not ready to build. That was just to get reviews and planning done, right? And so, if you give this to the private sector, they can more easily build if you let them, and if the land is available in the area that you want to build in.
Yeah, don't forget, there's somebody that owns the land, and then the city or the county holds the keys to be able to even break ground and to plug into the utilities and plug into all the water and sewer and the electric and all that stuff. And then not to mention the fact that they say, oh, we only want it so high, and we only want it this color, and we only want it this far back from the road, which is totally fine. I get it. Those are, it's all part of zoning. But those are all the things that delay projects. The city council, and then of course the neighbors are saying we don't want anything built next to me.
Well, I was just in Ohio, and my dad, was telling me, we're gonna have this development going up, and it's going to be all renters, and we don't want renters, right. Danille. Renters don't take care of their property, and we don't want them in the area, and right. And it's so funny because I obviously don't agree with that, but
rinse and repeat. That's happening all over the country.
But people don't want, and this wasn't even like a Section 8 issue. This was just the build to rents, right? They just don't want them because they just feel,
correct.
Everybody's like, not in my backyard. You don't want to mess with this. We had, it's funny. We have a friend and she's very, progressive and everything else. But she has a very nice house down in Chandler, and they want to build kind of like a Section 8 deal down there. Like she goes, it's 2 miles from my house, and I'm torn because I know these people need housing, but I don't want the crime and all the things that are associated with that. And so it's just, I think that's a whole nother thing that people are very,
this is my point,
adamant on.
Well,
it's very difficult. It's not just as easy as just building houses and people move into them.
There's neighborhood hearings, there's city hearings, there's all that kind of stuff. There's a process, which is totally fine. I do think developers need to be checked. Right? There needs to be a system, but man, it's tough.
I can't even paint my gate in my my one house in the HOA because the neighbors.
Well, you did paint
out.
It. Remember they said
it was the wrong shade of brown.
The wrong shade of brown. It was brown.
So I mean, if you're dealing with that, and my neighbors are saying it's the wrong shade of brown, which I literally had to get out a swab to check to see that it was like one shade off. You can't imagine if they want to build apartments or Section 8 or even when we're in Fountain Hills, they tried to build apartments and they said,
nope.
No, we're not going to build those. The city voted it down. And, so it's really hard to build housing. You can't just go to the middle of Iowa and build a bunch of housing because there's no jobs.
Yep.
Like, you need to build the housing where there's jobs, and people don't want the housing. And so that's why we're so short on the houses, and why immigration is becoming such a problem, because there's just no place for people to live.
And not to mention the fact that project that they got shut down was assisted care.
Yeah, right. I know.
That was the best part.
Right. It was everybody
so
60
everybody
plus.
just, they just say no. Which you listen, I get. Like that is the whole point of being democratic. Like you should have a vote and all that stuff. But the point is, it's hard to do. It's not easy. If cities helped relax zoning, if something was already zoned for, let's say, low density, maybe they can make it higher density, and that's it. What that means is if it's zoned for 4 units per acre, maybe they'll allow you 8 or 16. Just that little bit helps, and it all helps.
It's going to be interesting, though, when we look back at these times of mass migration, how it's portrayed, right? Like are they going to be able to figure out a way to provide housing and bring in more people, or is this going to be a time where, it's put so much strain on the middle class because of the housing and the social services, both?
I don't know. Maybe a little bit of both. I think, again, going back to the original topic here, just go take a look at France, Canada, Australia, and the UK. Just take a look at the lag. You gotta understand there's lag. Are the people that are here moving back? Some might, but general probably not. Generally, probably not. Okay, so there's obviously a lag with them, right? They come in probably first as renters, right? Then they get jobs, and then they save, then they buy houses. That's exactly what's happened in Canada. I grew up on the border of Canada. I watched this happen. So I know, I've seen it firsthand. They actually had a whole immigration policy that was based around investment. And that's why they have so much investment from Asia. That was the whole policy they had back in the day. Now it's a little bit different, ours is obviously a little bit different. But I think the point is you can't just add this many people and expect prices not to go up, right, or rents not to go up, period.
When you can't do price controls on the rent, for one, it's state to state, and for two, then there's no incentive to build. You need the private sector to build. So they're in this catch-22 area, and really the only way the only place that they can affect it is cutting the immigration. That's all they can really do, because they can't expedite home building, and they can't control the prices of the rent. So they have to cut the immigration.
They're controlling the housing, that's for sure.
They are doing that.
If you control the housing and then have the faucet open on population growth, which is what Trudeau just said, then that's a recipe for high prices. Period. High rents, high, and Canada is a great example. I haven't looked at Australia or France and the UK, but I will tell you. When we looked at that, there were multiple cities in Canada the average price was over $1 million. Talking about Toronto, Vancouver, I think there might have been one other one, and the others. But the average for this country was in the sevens. Like, imagine that, the guys. Like a CPA or just somebody, just a normal worker or bookkeeper is not making more money there. You guys need to understand that, right?
Yeah,
they're not. Like, the cost of living is higher, and so this is where it's headed, and it's a result of too many people coming in. I do believe in a really, really good immigration policy. I want to point that out. I believe in. We've had one over the years. Come in legally. There's a policy in place. If that has to be changed, great. That's where they should focus. But what we're dealing with now is not that. What Canada had was both.
I think Ivan also said Mexico is having issues with immigration from there as well. We haven't looked into that. That would actually be very interesting to look into, because everyone's coming through here is first going through Mexico. And of course, a decent amount of people are probably deciding to stay there, versus coming over here. So I do want to promote our podcast. We started a podcast. Well, we've had it for a while, but we revamped it. It's the Ken McElroy Show. If you just want to scan there, you can listen on Apple Podcast. We do updates on MC companies. We do kind of topics, hot topics of today, a little bit higher level, and we do some interviews as well. So check it out. It's on Thursdays. So let's hop into our premium questions this week. And those listening on YouTube, feel free to ask some questions, and I will get to some of them. Steve is asking, it feels like my generation, Gen Z, it is nearly impossible to buy a home. Are there any strategies where I can buy a home without such a large down payment?
I'm sorry about that.
The down payment's what's killing them, too.
know.
It's so high.
True. Well, Steve, it's a phenomenal question. It's obviously the hot potato, affordability. We've talked a little bit about this. First of all, we've talked about shared ownership. I know it's not ideal, but that is certainly one option. Down payment assistance, there actually is quite a bit. Take a look in your city, state, even federally. I know those programs are changing from time to time. Also, rent to own. That is another way. We had a young man working on our AV system. He's actually, him and his wife, are renting a home, and I was chatting with him while he was putting in our new system, and he actually, I think, is successful in getting this rent to own.
He did, and I think that's a really good one to bring up for those of you that don't have houses, because I would have never known about this. But I mean, there's a lot more people now that houses aren't selling like they were, that are willing to do rent to own.
Yeah. That's why the sub 2 thing works with Pace Morby. I take a look at he's got a great program called sub 2. But those are all great ways to look on, obviously. And then they're talking about a 40-year mortgage.
Yep. Most said that there is a 40-year mortgage product.
Yep. And that could help because remember, they're solving to your monthly payment. Typically, they're solving to your monthly payment. If you spread that out over 10 years, that certainly helps. And then, of course, if you're, let's say you were in the military or something like that, there's all kinds of really good programs with the VA and with low down payments. So there's actually more than you think. Hold your hat, because I think that prices are going to now go up more.
Eli's asking to clarify, is rent to own the same thing as owner financed?
Kind of. So owner finance would be you put some money down and the owner finances it. A rent to own would be that you pay rent. That's a great question, by the way. You pay rent. Let's say you're paying $3,000 a month. A portion of that goes toward your down payment. Right. You know what I mean? Then you go to a finance later. So there's a lot of ways to skin it. It's an excellent question.
And it's really good for the homeowner, too, because if you... A lot of times, you obviously would use an attorney and you'd obviously get this all papered up. But a lot of times if the renter decides not to buy the home, even though they paid a little bit more each month, then they're just walking away from what they've put down. Yeah. So it really is a win-win situation. It makes it maybe somebody rents to own for, does a 5-year, contract with you that takes care of their down payment, and then they just have to get the loan for the rest of the money. So there are ways to do it.
Here's the biggest pro tip, though, for those of you who stayed on. The biggest advantage can be actually to the seller, because the seller can break up their payments over time and reduce their tax burden. So think of, somebody that owns a house free and clear and has moved somewhere and they're retired, right? And they're renting it. So they can, if they sell today, they have a capital gain. But if they can break up their tax payments over time, the way it has to be structured right. But that's also an interesting way to approach it.
And a lot of people that own property don't know this. So a good way to maybe do it, it takes a little work, but, call listings that are expiring or listings that have been sitting a while and just say, hey, I'm looking to rent to own this. Like, what can we do? What can we work out?
Or if you're in that situation, just ask your landlord. Yeah. The very worst thing that you could get back is a no.
Yeah. Landlord's going to be mad about it.
And one of the reasons why this is important to look at right now is because the interest rates are high compared to what they were. So, an owner can give you a 4.5-5% interest rate. That's their choice. A seller, let's say. So it's up to them. It's between the two of you.
Yep, absolutely. So our next question comes from Melissa. She asks, "How do I handle a tenant that has disappeared on me? He hasn't paid rent and no one is there. can I just put his stuff somewhere and move somebody else in?
Be careful, be careful, be careful.
Yeah.
So first of all,
State to state,
there
yeah.
are landlord laws in each state that are clear on this. But the first thing that I think of is, you know, I've had, unfortunately, residents pass away.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So, in fact, I can think of one story where the resident passed away. We had this issue, and then we found next of kin, and then the kids came, and they took all the stuff, and then we got sued because it was supposed to go to the estate. So there's a process. Now, I'm not saying that's what the situation is, but anyway, there's a process that you have to follow, and there's certain notifications that are required in your state to be able to. I think it's called the notice of abandonment, and then there's some time frames and stuff like that, and then you can enter the unit, and then be careful with the stuff. There's also laws around that. You know, you have to inventory it. I would film it, and then you have to keep it for a period of time. So be careful with this, because you do not want to get into a situation where they say, I had a gold watch that my grandfather gave me in that unit, and you entered illegal, and you're going to get in trouble. So be careful.
Yeah, absolutely. Tammy is asking, actually, you know what? Let me jump to on YouTube. Josh had a good question. He said, do you expect more compression in multifamily values as rates are remaining high? If so, what differences are you seeing in the different classes?
Great question. So we're seeing it in the A class right now, compression. Again, based on if you were Josh, if you saw what we posted earlier, where you have avid rent growth, you're not seeing compression. Where you have rent concessions, you're seeing it. So think of, a lot of the Sunbelt areas, or where there's a lot of housing that got delivered. And so yes, but we're seeing it in the A class. So the thing about A class is if the A class is $2,000 and they're offering $1,000 or $2,000 or 1 month free, it's really $150 plus off a month. And so now you're actually dipping into the B class, which is then has to dip into the C class. So it's starting. It's already there. And yes, we're seeing massive compression. We just bought a deal in Vegas because of that, Class A, and then we're buying another one in Phoenix that we'll put out very soon, in the next 2 weeks. That will also we're buying well below market as a result of the compressed cap. The cap rates went up and interest rates went up.
So John is asking, with the current interest rates and high prices, does it even make sense to invest in real estate?
It just, again, that's an excellent question. Again, I think it's always time, and I mean that. Like, there's always a city, there's always a county, there's always a state, there's always an area, there's always a submarket, and there's always a story. So for me, I never stop. Sometimes it's just harder. So what was harder was when everyone was doing it. Mm-hmm. That's when it was harder. When you have 10 or 20 or 30 or 40 offers on a deal, which is very common for what I just came out of, and now it's 20% of that. So that's what you want. So now to answer your question, yes, there are deals, but they have to. It's all just math at the end of the day. It's expenses plus your mortgage. And your rent, and is there cash flow or not, and what's that cash on cash return? So if you can figure that out, and the key is just to do as many as you can. So I was meeting with Charlie last week. I think we looked at probably 100 deals in the last 3 months, easily, underwritten. Actually visited them, and we ended up with 2. So now it's probably easier on the single family side, I would guess, but yes, it's always time, because you get these massive tax benefits and cash flow, and
for those looking that are accredited, that are looking to invest with MC companies, you can go to investwithmc.com/YouTube. And we, like I said, we only do take accredited investors. So Tammy's asking, what areas of a rental should I focus on to increase rents, aka kitchens, bedrooms, bathrooms, etc.?
So like if she owns something?
Yeah.
Got it. So if you own something now and you're gonna, let's say you have minimal dollars, you think about what you would want. Like just put yourself in their shoes, right? So you have to assess, first of all, what the place looks like now. But my experience has been that most people want really nice upgraded kitchens. So that would be granite countertops and new appliances, for example. And you don't need to buy stainless. So I would say black appliances and new countertops. And then the flooring is another one. So really, it's very reasonable. The hardwood flooring is something that's soundproof too. So if you're on the second floor, it becomes a real problem. Can be the old stuff. So what you want soundproof hardwood flooring look, like the look. You know what I mean? Throughout the, and then just a fresh coat of paint. You should be able to get away with that. If you have a little bit more money, you could do the fixtures. And you could go into the bathrooms and stuff like that. But the bathrooms and the kitchens are typically something that, people want fresh and new and clean.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, but by the way, one more thing. Don't do it if you don't get more rent.
Right.
So that's a really important thing. So I've seen this happen where, I've seen people over-improve stuff. So if you do too much work, like several $1,000s of work, and you're not going to get another nickel, then it's probably not worth it. However, if you're going to get a renter long term, it might not be such a bad thing. Like Danille's got a unit right now that's about ready to vacate, and it needs refreshed.
Yeah,
right?
It's a little bit of work. But it's stuff that has to be done.
Correct. She's going to have to do the work just to attract a good renter.
Yeah. So sometimes you have that, like if it's in such bad shape, but then other times, like you said, like you got to do the math. Like if the floor is going to be $11,000, like how much more rent is that floor going to get you or whatever,
I would hope not. Our floors are 2 to 3, 4,000, but that would 11 would be a lot.
I got an 11 on my bed.
You should talk to
about
me.
That.
We should talk more.
Richard has an interesting question. I actually don't know if you'll know the answer to this. It's actually very related to this video.
I'm still shocked at the 11.
I'm shocked that I got to hit up your guy. What if your tenant is not legal because it's been harder to evict them because they don't have a social or a ITIN number?
Oh, wow. Wow. That's a legal question. That's a difficult scenario because you're supposed to check all that before they move in.
Mm-hmm. So do they technically? Well, I guess it's state to state, right? Like on whether they need to have that.
Federal, I think.
Okay.
Like it's you really need to consult your local landlord tenant law attorney there and figure that out. It can be different, but it's you're now getting into you have to establish occupancy and all that first. I don't know if that's been done. But obviously, if they're in there illegally, I do believe you have to follow the state or local laws. So I'm sorry I don't have more for you there, but it's really getting into more of a legal process. Just got to be careful. You're not getting into discrimination or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
It's really, really, really important that you call an attorney and figure that out.
Yeah, and I think this comes back to, just be really careful who you move in, right? Like make sure like all your I's are dotted, your T's are crossed, don't ever, move in somebody, if that is a federal, rule that doesn't have certain identifications. I mean, because you have to, like for us at least, like we run background and credit checks on everybody. So I don't know if you didn't have a social, how you would even run a credit and background check on someone.
Yeah, it's paid by the tenant. Like if you're buying a car, they run a credit check on you. You buying a house, they run a credit check on you. You buy a TV at Best Buy, they run a credit check on you. You get a credit card, they run a credit check on you. You should be doing it for your rental. And that's the first thing. And you should be doing it with everybody, not just that one person. So it should be the same every single time.
Yeah, and it's everyone that lives in the unit.
And that could have been a mistake. But even so, if that was missed, you're now going to have to unfortunately unwind that with your local, somebody who understands the local landlord tenant law.
Absolutely. Well, thank you guys for tuning in, and we will see you next week.
Cheers, guys.